All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. It is so good that you have joined us for our Skeptic course. Tonight's topic is, what is the evidence for the existence of God? And my name is Simon, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here. So in case you're brand new to the Skeptic course and you're brand new to joining an online class like this, let me give you a quick overview and a quick rundown of what's going to happen. I'm going to introduce you to Darin, who's our speaker and teacher for the course, and we're going to jump right into the material. Are you ready? All right. Tonight, if you are joining us, and whether you are maybe you're a seeker, maybe you are looking to grow in your faith, and you know what? Maybe you are a skeptic. I just wanted to say a big welcome to you. And did you know that, being a skeptic isn't a bad thing? So I just want to put that myth to bed right now. Being a skeptic is okay. It's okay to have a healthy amount of skepticism in your life, because if you didn't have a healthy amount of skepticism in your life, you'd be dead. So it's okay to have a healthy amount of skepticism. And so we just wanted to say, if you are skeptical of faith or anything, we just wanted to say, we're just so glad that you're here. If you're a skeptic, that just simply means you haven't had enough evidence presented to you for you to be able to put your trust in something yet. And so we hope that throughout the Skeptic course, we're able to give you enough evidence to for you to be able to make a rational decision, because we really believe that rational people can believe in God. Rational people can believe in the evidence for creation. So here we go. We're going to get right into it. If you want to follow along with us on a fill in the blanks or an outline, you can go to broadwaychurch.com/skeptic, and you can download, there you go, you can download the Skeptic booklet. So you just click on the link at the very bottom that says download Skeptic booklet, and boom, you can follow along with us, fill in the blanks and write down your questions there. Now, hopefully the topics that we get into throughout the course are going to bring up some questions in your life. That's a good thing. We want you to ask questions. We're not scared of your questions. We welcome them. We want to journey together as we explore faith and really deal with the toughest questions in Christianity. So what I want you to do is, when you write down your question, you see a number on the screen right there? I want you to text your questions to that number if you feel comfortable, okay? So 604-243-4102. Write that number down right now so you have it with you. That's the number that you're going to text in your question. Now, those questions go directly to my phone, and I will be able to ask Darin live at the end of today's teaching some of your questions, okay? So this will be the interactive part where you want your questions being answered. We'll answer them, okay? We'll ask them right to Darin. Now, speaking of Darin, let's introduce him. Hello and welcome, Darin. Good to have you.
Hey, Simon, great to be here. Hello, folks.
Can you say that again? My sound was off. Are you there?
Yes, I said hello. Great to be here.
Perfect. Okay, good. I can hear you now. Welcome, Darin. So Darin is the lead pastor of Broadway Church in Vancouver, and he's been the lead pastor there for about 12 years. Darin, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself. And you know what, Darin, answer me this. Why Skeptic? Where did the idea of Skeptic even come from? Why are we doing a course like this?
Yeah, great question. So I became a Christ follower when I was 19 years of age. I had a life-changing experience with God at that point in my life. But I still had lots of questions. I still had lots of nagging doubts. So what I did was I began a journey. Based on my experience with God, I then began a journey of digging for answers, asking a whole bunch of questions, doing a whole lot of research. And for the next 40 years, that's what I've been doing. Every time I've had a question, a concern, a frustration, a doubt, I didn't run from it. I flowed with it. And I actually just started to do some research, and I was surprised to find that answers are really not that hard to find. If you go looking, the answers are there. And so really Skeptic is a accumulation, if you will, of 40 years of research and work that I've put together. Some presentations that I've made over the last few years. I've gone into colleges and universities, for example, and made presentations or done debates on the evidence for the existence of God or the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus, for example, or just gone into colleges and universities and said, hey, I'm a theist, I'm a Christ follower, ask me anything. And those have been some exciting, some fun times as well. So we've kind of pulled this all together, about 3 years ago, and formed it into a 6-week course we called Skeptic. And it's been an exciting journey over those years.
Awesome. Well, Darin, I appreciate your time. Thank you for putting this course together, and thank you for joining us live here today. Now, for all of those people that are tuning and watching, now we've had over 100 people register and sign up before the course started, and then we have more people tuning in tonight to watch us. We have people that have pre-registered all across Canada, people from as far away from Thailand. So wherever you're watching from tonight, whether you're local, you're close, or you're on the other side of the world, thank you for joining us. It's so good to have you. I did want to mention, so the content and the material that we're going to be engaging with tonight, it was actually filmed a whole year ago, right at the beginning of January of 2020. And so if you notice that Darin has like a little bit more hair on his head in the video that he does here live, it's because it was filmed a year ago. Okay. And so full disclosure. So if you see people in the room or milling about, this is before the pandemic and everything like that. It was all filmed. So this will be our third time presenting the Skeptic course, and it's a 6-week course. And we're so glad that you've joined us. Tonight's topic is what is the evidence for the existence of God? We are so excited to jump right in. So get your phones ready. Get ready to text in your questions if you have any, and we'll see Darin at the end, and we'll ask him some live questions that come from you. So with no further ado, what is the evidence for the existence of God? Here we go.
Welcome, folks. I am honored that you've chosen to be with us. I'm honored that you've chosen to spend the time and invest the time here in the Skeptic course. Maybe you're just kind of dipping your toe into it tonight and you're not sure if you're going to carry through with the whole course. Great idea. Come test drive it tonight, and hopefully you're going to enjoy yourself, learn something, meet some great people at the table around you. But we're going to get right into it. We're going on a journey starting tonight. So grab your book, and I'm going to do my best every time there's a blank, and I'll say, as your outline says, or something like that, so you'll be able to follow along with me. So let's get right into it. Are you ready, folks? A construction crew working on the foundation of a high-rise building in downtown Vancouver recently discovered some copper wire about 150 feet below ground. So local archaeologists claim that this proves that Vancouver was far ahead of the rest of our country. They claim that this proved that our ancestors in Vancouver had an ancient phone network. Well, not to be outdone, a construction crew in Toronto, of course, claimed to have discovered glass fragments 200 feet below ground there. And so Ontario archaeologists immediately claimed that this proved that their ancestors had an ancient fiber optic network. Classic Toronto, right? Well, a week later, a crew was digging in downtown St. John's, Newfoundland. And they reached 250 feet below ground, and they found absolutely nothing. And their archaeologists immediately claimed that this proved that Newfoundland was home to the very first wireless network. Do Christ followers, Christians, make the same wild assertion? Do we claim that God exists based on no evidence whatsoever? In 1962, Gerasim Titov, the Soviet cosmonaut and the second man in space, he stood before a nest of microphones upon his return to Earth. And he was asked what he saw. He replied, and I quote, he said, "I saw no God nor any angels while in orbit." And people laughed. If we can't see him with our eyes, how can we know that there is a God? I mean, what evidence can we actually point to? Bertrand Russell, the famous atheist, was once asked what he would do if he were to die and discover that he was wrong. They said, what would you say to God if you had to stand before him someday? And here was Bertrand Russell's reply. He said, I would tell him that he didn't give me enough evidence. So was Bertrand Russell right? Is there a lack of evidence for the existence of God? Well, 2,000 years ago, a highly educated and influential man named Paul addressed this subject in a letter he wrote to a church in the ancient city of Rome. Listen carefully to what that letter says. Paul taught that there are those who, and I quote, suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them. He said it's obvious to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, like his eternal power, his divine nature, have clearly been seen. How? Being understood from what has been made, so that men and women are without excuse. So Paul was saying that there is enough evidence before our eyes to grasp the truth that we are not alone in the universe, that there is someone behind all of this. In other words, you need to do nothing more than, as your outline says, look around you. If you're looking for evidence for the existence of God, begin by looking around you. So are you looking for evidence for God's existence? Have you considered, as your outline says, letter A, the existence of the universe? I bring to you evidence for the existence of God. First of all, the existence of the universe. Have you ever wondered where the universe came from? I mean, okay, I have this podium here on the platform. Let's look at this podium for a second. Where did that podium come from? Well, what are the options? Well, one of my options is, it is an eternal podium. It has always existed. From eternity past, it will always exist for the future. It had no beginning. It's an eternal podium. That's one option. Another option is, it created itself. It suddenly appeared out of nothing in a vast explosion of nothingness. And it simply created itself. Or a third option, it has a creator. Someone made it. Someone brought it into existence. Now, which of those three options seems the most likely, the most plausible to you? It's always existed. It's an eternal podium. It created itself in a vast explosion of nothingness. Or someone created it. Well, what's true of this podium is equally true of our universe. So what are the possible explanations for the existence, the undeniable existence of our universe? Well, as far as our best thinkers are concerned, there are only two possible explanations. One of these explanations I'm about to give you has to be true. The universe is either eternal or our universe had a beginning, one or the other. The universe is either eternal or it had a beginning. Now, for centuries, atheists proposed the first option. They proposed the option that the universe was eternal, that it had always existed. Bertrand Russell's famous claim was, in a court case, he said that the universe is, in a debate I should say, that the universe is just there, that's all. He said, deal with it. The universe is eternal, it's just there. That long represented the atheist position. However, in 1929, astronomer Edwin Hubble made a discovery that rocked the scientific world. Through his observations from distant space, Hubble was able to prove that the galaxies in our universe were moving away from us. Hubble had visual and measurable evidence that our universe is expanding. And this fact led to an undeniable reality. If our universe is expanding, as your outline says, that means the universe had a beginning. You see that? It's like a balloon. If the universe is expanding, that means, as your outline says, the universe had to have had a beginning. And that led to what's now known as the Big Bang cosmology. That roughly 13.7, 13.8 billion years ago, our universe began to exist. Now, if the universe had a beginning, where did it come from? Now, there are only two possible options. As your outline says, the universe either brought itself into existence or it had a creator. There are only two options. It either brought itself into existence or it had a creator. Now, which makes more sense to you? Do you think the universe created itself, brought itself into existence? Or do you think it's more plausible that the universe was created? Well, let's look at the first one. Could the universe have brought itself into existence? Could the universe cause itself to exist? Now think about it. How could something cause itself to exist? It's actually an irrational concept. In order to cause yourself to exist, you have to exist before you exist in order to bring yourself into existence. Think about it. To cause yourself to exist, you have to exist before you exist in order to bring yourself into existence. Essentially, when you get right down to it, the foundation of atheism is this. On its own, out of nothing, came everything. On its own, out of nothing, came everything. As your outline says, the most plausible alternative is that our universe was created by an incredibly powerful outside agent. Incredibly powerful outside agent was created. Now, this often leads to the question that every child has asked their parent at some time. Well, then who created God? Every kid said, Mom, Dad, where did I come from? Well, we created you. Well, who created you? Well, our parents. Who created them? Their parents. Who created them? Their parents. Who created them? Just be quiet. Well, who created them? Who created the very first humans? God did. Who created God? Some people, when they ask this question, they think they're tricking you and they're asking you some impossible question. No, it's actually quite simple. No one made God. God has always existed. God is an eternal being. And by the way, this isn't special pleading on the part of the theist. For centuries, atheists asserted that the universe was eternal. Well, if God can be eternal, then why can't the universe be eternal? Because as Edwin Hubble demonstrated, we have strong and convincing evidence that the universe had a beginning. That's why. So the most plausible explanation for the existence of our universe is an eternal being that is powerful enough to create and sustain our universe. And we can tease out even more. We can deduce even more about the being that created the universe. This being would have to be eternal and uncaused because this being brought into existence everything that exists. So it would have to be in itself an uncaused being. This being would have to be outside of space and time because this being created space and time. Because that's what the Big Bang represents, the creation of time, space, matter, energy. This being would have to be immensely powerful and incredibly intelligent to create the complexity that our world represents. And centuries ago, that's exactly how God revealed himself. The author of the biblical book of Genesis says that Abraham, I quote, called upon the name of the Lord, the eternal God. Centuries later, a man named Moses was commissioned by God to lead the nation of Israel out of the nation of Egypt. And during the job interview process, Moses asked God a simple question. Moses said this, suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, oh yeah, well, what's his name? What shall I tell them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. That's what you should say to the Israelites. Tell them, I am has sent you. Now, God wasn't using bad grammar. He said, my name is I am. Literally, he's saying, tell them that the one who exists sent you. He's saying, I am the eternal God, the one who has always existed. So according to the biblical authors, there's enough evidence before our eyes to grasp the truth that we're not alone in the universe, that there's someone behind all of this. You need to do nothing more than look around you. And as we've just seen, the very existence of the universe stands as a powerful evidence for the existence of God. But the universe isn't done speaking, folks. The universe has more testimony to give. See, not only does the mere existence of the universe speak to God's existence, but I would propose to you that, as your outline says, the complex fine-tuning of the universe also points to God's existence. The complex fine-tuning of the universe. And what are we talking about here? Imagine with me that you're walking barefoot through a field, a bunch of tall grass with a friend, and as you're walking, your toe stubs on something, and you look down, and look at that. A boulder. Your toe hit a rock, a little boulder. And your friend asks you, so how do you think that boulder got there? And you say, you might possibly answer by saying, well, for all you know, that boulder has been there since the beginning of time. You know, the stone was there, some volcano spewed it out, or some glacier dropped it off. It would be difficult to argue with you about that. It's not a crazy premise. Now suppose as you're continuing to walk along your journey, and once again your toe stubs, and this time, you stumble on an iPhone. Now, your friend asks you the same question about the iPhone that they asked you about the rock. How do you think that iPhone got there? Oh, I got a few messages here. I would highly doubt that you would give the same answer for the iPhone that you gave for the rock. Why is that? The reason is simple. Unlike the rock or the boulder, the iPhone has obviously been assembled with a purpose. It has mechanisms that are finely tuned. It didn't just happen on its own. It bears the distinctive marks of a designer. Now step with me out of the field and step with me into a cave somewhere on the continent of Africa. An archaeologist has stumbled upon a simple etching on a wall. It's faded and it's barely legible. But it's clearly depicting the stick figure of some type of antelope. I'm a really good artist. But, I mean, this is ancient, folks, okay? So clearly it's an etching on a wall, and it's clearly some ancient antelope. And it's colored, you know. And the archaeologist, without hesitation, points to this drawing as proof of some ancient, reasonably intelligent ancestor that put it there. No one argues. Clear, excellent drawings of animals don't just appear out of nowhere. Now travel with me to a darkened theater where they're showing a rerun of Contact, the film based upon a book by the famous atheist Carl Sagan. In the movie, scientists are scanning the skies for signs of intelligent life in space. And for years, their radio telescopes receive only random static. And then, one day, they begin receiving transmissions of prime numbers. Numbers that can only be divided by themselves and the number 1. The scientists reason, properly I believe, that it is too improbable that there'd be a natural cause behind a string of numbers like that. This wasn't just static, this was information. And from that, in the film, they conclude that there is an intelligence out there. As the famous atheist Carl Sagan himself once said, and I quote him, "The receipt of a single, just one message from space would be enough evidence to know that there is intelligent life out there." Now, where are we going with all this? What do iPhones and fields and etchings and caves and prime numbers from space have to do with evidence for the existence of God? Reason with me. If simple prime numbers communicate the existence of an intelligent designer, what does something as complex as DNA communicate? Every single cell in the human body contains more information than the entire Encyclopedia Britannica combined. Every single cell. What does that tell us? If the existence of a simple stick drawing of an antelope is enough evidence to surmise an intelligent designer, what does the existence of the actual living, breathing, reproducing, three-dimensional antelope tell us? As your outline says, our universe bears undeniable evidence of design. Undeniable evidence of design. To illustrate just how powerful this evidence is, let me throw a couple of numbers on the whiteboard here. Okay? Here's a number. 13.7, of course. 13.7 billion. That's how many years since the Big Bang, cosmologists estimate, physicists. Here's a number, 10 to the 17th power. That's 10 with 17 zeros behind it. That is the number of seconds since the Big Bang. That's the number of seconds in human history. 10 with 17 zeros behind it. Here's a fascinating number. 10 with 14 zeros behind it, the 14th power. That's the number of cells in the human body. Okay, little tiny cells, that's how many cells in your body. If somebody asks you tomorrow, I wonder how many cells in your body? 10 to the 14th power. How'd you know? I go to Broadway Church. That's what you do. Here's a number, 10 to the 80th power. That's 10 with 80 zeros behind it. That is the number of subatomic particles in the whole universe. Okay, that's a huge number. You say, Darin, why do you have those numbers up there? One person declared that you and I live on what they said was the knife edge of existence. You see, there are certain fundamental constants and qualities that were embedded in our universe from the very moment of the Big Bang. We're just going to touch on 3 of these. They're called cosmological constants, fundamental constants. For example, there's what's called the gravitational constant. This was embedded right from the very beginning. If this were not exactly as it is, the universe would not have been able to form because planets and stars would not have formed. So think of a dial. I was thinking the other day, I can still, my combination lock from high school. I went to high school in the 70s. I can still remember my combination lock. It's 52-28-8. I should deserve a round of applause, but anyway. So now it's too late. Now you're just taunting me. So think of this, so you got that dial, and there's all these little etches here when you turn, 50. So I don't know how many in your typical lock. Let's say 100, and so 52-28-8. So that's the gravitational constant. There's a dial. And that gravitational constant had to be set at a specific number. We'll get to that number in a second. And then there's something called the weak force. The weak force. It had its own dial. And the weak force operates in the nucleus of an atom. Without it, intelligent life would not be able to exist because chemistry would be impossible. The weak force makes chemistry possible. And then there's something called the cosmological constant. Cosmological constant. And this is the power, if you will, that sort of measures the expansion of the acceleration of the universe. Without this, the universe would not have expanded. We just would have been maintained this little minuscule thing, but it's the expansion of the universe that allowed the chemistry to take place and planets and stars to form and so on. Okay, so what are the numbers here? One gentleman actually declared that, I'll get to that in a second. Each of these constants has to be intricately set at a level of specificity that is unfathomable. If all these, and these are just 3 of many, if all these dials were not specifically set at a specific number, intelligent life would not be able to exist. You say, well, how specific does all of this have to be? If the gravitational constant had been altered just by 10 to the 60th power, no life on Earth or anywhere in the universe. 10 to the 80th is the number of subatomic particles. 10 to the 17th power is how many seconds in 13.7 billion years. If this had been moved just by 10 with 60 zeros, no life anywhere in the universe. The weak force, if it had been adjusted 10 to the 100th power, 10 with 100 zeros after it, no life at all anywhere in the universe. That is a bigger number than the number of subatomic particles in the universe. Folks, if the cosmological constant had been adjusted, tweaked just by 10 to the 120th power, just that much, the universe would not have expanded. No life. Our universe has been finely tuned, complexly finely tuned. Roger Penrose, famous physicist cosmologist, says he claimed that in order to produce a universe that even roughly looks like ours, the initial conditions must have been fine-tuned with a precision of, this is what he said when he added it all up, 1 times 10 to the 10th to the 123rd power. That is arguably the largest number in history. Mike, where's Mike? You're a math professor. What does that even mean? And that's a massive, huge number. Now, Anthony Flew was perhaps the most famous atheist of the late 20th and early 21st century. He was one of the signatories of the Humanist Manifesto, the third volume, and he was the author of the famous atheist books such as God and Philosophy, The Presumption of Atheism, Atheistic Humanism. He was a fellow of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. He was the icon for and champion of skeptics and atheists, for unbelievers, for decades. However, late in his life, Anthony Flew left atheism. Late in his life, Anthony Flew declared that he was no longer an atheist. I have a book that he wrote here. It says, "There is no God," and then he scribbled out "no," and it says, "There is a God." How the world's most notorious atheist changed his mind. Now, why? I used to watch debates where theists would debate atheists, and he was the atheist that they would always choose to debate, Anthony Flew. He was a legendary atheist. Why did he change his mind? What changed his mind? I quote him. He says, "It now seems to me that the finding of more than 50 years of DNA research has provided materials for a new and enormously powerful argument to design. I simply must follow where the evidence leads." What changed Anthony Flew's mind was the design of the universe. In his own words, he had to follow where the evidence leads. Well, not every atheist has changed their mind because of this, so how do other atheists respond to this incredibly powerful design argument? Remember Richard Dawkins, who's the author of the famous book, The God Delusion, a bestseller in its time? In his book, Dawkins sums up the state of the art when it comes to atheism's response to the fine-tuning, the complex fine-tuning of the universe. Dawkins proposes that our universe isn't the only universe out there. Dawkins proposes that there are an infinite number of universes out there, what's called the multiverse. And there are billions and trillions and gazillions, infinite number of universes out there with every conceivable type of universe in existence. And by chance, by pure luck, we just happen to be in a universe that randomly produced life. Now, what evidence is there for this multiverse? This infinite number of universes, this world ensemble, as some people call it. What evidence is there for a multiverse? None. There is no evidence. There is not a single shred of evidence of there being one other universe out there, let alone infinite number. Now think about that for a moment. In order to explain the complexity and fine-tuning of the only known universe, the atheist is forced to appeal to universes that, as far as the evidence shows, don't even exist. Let's quickly review. The question we're addressing is this: is there evidence for the existence of God? So far we've said, look around you. The very existence of the universe testifies to God's existence. The complex fine-tuning of the universe testifies to God's existence, but there's more. Not only can you look around you, but as your outline says, you can also look within you to see evidence of God's existence. And what evidence do we see for God's existence when we look inside ourselves within? When we look within, as your outline says, we see the existence of objective moral values and duties. Objective is the key word, moral values and duties. Now, what do we mean by that? For years, our newscasts were filled with the name Robert Pickton and the gruesome discoveries investigators found on his pig farm in Port Coquitlam, 20 minutes from here. Pickton tortured, murdered, dismembered women, and he did it all for his own pleasure. I ask you a simple question. Do you think that what Robert Pickton did was wrong? Now, I want you to be very careful how you answer that question, because your response has serious implications. I'm not asking you if what you believe what he did was distasteful, or unfortunate, or unkind, or inappropriate, or socially destructive. I'm not asking you that. I am asking if you believe that what he did was objectively, morally wrong. In other words, do you believe that even if there were no laws forbidding Robert Pickton from kidnapping, torturing, murdering, and dismembering women, would he still have been wrong for doing what he did, even if it wasn't against the law? If you answer yes, what Robert Pickton did was wrong, no matter what the law permits, then you are agreeing with what for most people is a self-evident truth. The truth that objective moral values and duties exist. Meaning, you believe that there are activities like torturing a baby for fun that can never be labeled as acceptable in any culture, at any time, for any reason. There are some things that are just plain wrong. You believe that there are things that are objectively wrong, yes, even evil. We know this to be true just like we know 2 + 2 = 4 is true. It's that basic. So basic that some of you are wondering, Darin, why are you even talking about this? Here's the thing, as your outline says. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties don't exist. If God does not exist, objective or right and wrong are merely illusions. If God does not exist, right and wrong are rules that we've simply made up out of thin air. If there's no God, we are nothing more than cosmic slime, and it's every slime for themselves. If there's no God, we have no ultimate reason to keep Robert Pickton locked up because all he did was something that brought him pleasure. We could just as well lock up people who enjoy mushrooms. But he hurt other people, you protest. We're protecting society. Okay, that's fine. But don't you dare call him a monster. And don't look down on him in any way. And don't you dare call him evil or call him wrong. Because if there is no God, the words evil and wrong have lost all objective meaning. They're just opinions. They're just your opinion. It's like saying, I like ice cream and I don't like chocolate. I don't like murder and I don't like rape. It's just your opinion. It's purely subjective. Subjective meaning it's tied to you as a subject. It's not objective. It's not true for everyone. It's just true for you. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I need to be very clear. If you're here and you're an atheist, hear this. I am not saying that you have to believe in God in order to live a moral life. I'm not saying that at all. Many, perhaps even most atheists, are fine, upstanding, moral people. The issue is not, can a person live a moral life apart from God? Yes, of course they can. The issue is, do objective moral values actually exist apart from God? And the answer would have to be no. Apart from the existence of God, there is no rational, objective basis for morality. And it may surprise some of you that on this point, many atheists agree. For example, again, quoting Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist, I quote him. He said, describing our reality according to atheism, there is no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. I quote him. He said, it's pretty hard to defend absolutist morals on grounds other than religious ones. Dawkins is simply facing the facts of his atheistic belief. If God does not exist, objective values and morals and moral values and duties don't exist. To whom are we obligated if there is no God? Why? To who do we have a duty to be good? There's no God. We just came from nothing. We just make up rules and do our best to follow the rules we make up. But as your outline says, but objective moral values do exist. They do exist. And deep down, we all know it. Deep down, we know that actions like rape, intolerance, child abuse are moral crimes. You know it, and I know it. And this knowing is God's stamp upon every one of us. One biblical author put it this way. He said, God's law is not something alien that's imposed on us from outside, but woven into the very fabric of our creation. There's something deep within us that echoes God's yes and no, right and wrong. So the question we're addressing is, is there evidence for the existence of God? We've said, look around you, the existence of the universe, the complex fine-tuning. We've said, look within you, the existence of objective moral values and duties. Now someone may ask, if this God exists, then why is he so distant? I mean, why is he hiding from us? Why doesn't he show himself? Now, first of all, I would argue that creating the cosmos, and embedding it with layers of complexity from the visual to the subatomic level, and then stamping every human heart with an identical moral intuition is not hiding. Nevertheless, I understand the question. And that brings us to the final evidence we're going to briefly touch on the existence of God. There's evidence if you look around you, there's evidence if you look within you, and there's evidence if you look behind you. You look behind you. Now, what does that mean? What are we talking about? We're talking about recorded history. We're talking about taking the time to study the historical facts surrounding the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I think that's a blank on your outline. I'm not sure. Is that letter A? Yes. Yeah, the historical facts, letter A, surrounding the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And there are historical facts that every sincere seeker must account for. Now, hear this. Historians reached a consensus long ago regarding the existence of Jesus. It's undeniable that this incredible man lived and died in first century Palestine. Every so often I'll get into a debate or discussion with some internet infidel or someone who'll say, oh, there's no proof Jesus ever existed. If someone ever says that to you, that is evidence A, that they have no idea what they're talking about and they're in way over their head. It is undeniable. It's not debated amongst historians and even New Testament critics and scholars that Jesus of Nazareth existed. That's not debated. Though anyone who would say otherwise is stuck in the 1800s scholarship. It's a matter of historical evidence. And what surprises many people is that the resurrection of Jesus is equally a matter of historical evidence. And there are essentially 4 established facts recognized by virtually all New Testament critics, scholars, and historians today. And the facts themselves are not in dispute, but these facts attest to the resurrection of Jesus. What are they? That's next week. Next week, we are going to spend our time looking at these historical facts, and then we're going to look at 2,000 years worth of skepticism. What have atheists and other religions said about these historical facts for the last 2,000 years? And we are going to debunk every one of them. You're going to be shocked at how easily that will be done. So, is there evidence for the existence of God? Absolutely. The truth is out there if you don't suppress it. Look around you, look within you, and look behind you. In fact, it takes more effort to ignore evidence for God's existence than it takes to find evidence for God's existence. All right. I want you to take 10 minutes to talk about this around your table, and then at 7:30, we're going to open it up for questions and invite you to go to a microphone. Thank you, folks. Chat about this around your table right now. What do you think? Interact with what we've just talked about for the last few minutes.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. And thank you, Darin, for the teaching. So normally when we're running a Skeptic course, we're all around round tables, and we would all engage in a discussion and talk amongst ourselves. But today, since only you can see me and I can't see you, we're going to skip right to the question and answer time. So if you have any questions, now's your chance. Send me a text, let me know. And 604-243-4102. Text me and I will be able to ask Darin some questions. So Darin, first up, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, here we go. If the universe needs a beginning, why doesn't God need a beginning?
If the universe needs a beginning, why doesn't God need a beginning? Well, first of all, we know the universe needs a beginning because it's all the evidence, it appears, that we have is that our universe is contingent, that it had a beginning, it had a start to it. So we're simply following where the evidence leads there. So it's not as though we're imposing some philosophical mandate upon the universe. We've decided that the universe must have a beginning. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying all of the evidence seems to be pointing to a contingent universe, a universe that had a start, had a beginning to it. So why doesn't God need a beginning? Because God is the uncaused cause. I mean, philosophically, you need to have an uncaused cause. Let me go about it this way. The argument is not whatever exists has a cause. That's not the argument. The argument is whatever begins to exist has a cause. Because if something begins to exist, it either brought itself into existence or it either created itself or someone else created it. Well, as we tried to point out logically, the universe could not have brought itself into existence. That's irrational. So the only other option is that it was brought into existence by a being outside of the universe. And rationally speaking, you can then tease out what the nature of that being. And it would have to be eternal, because whatever created space and time has to be outside of space and time. So think about that. The Big Bang, at the moment that the beginning of time, if you will, was the creation of, or the beginning of, time and space. So whatever created time and space is outside of time and space. And it just so happens that that is how God has revealed himself historically. So it's a combination of two. There's a philosophical, logical reason for the eternality of God, and through special revelation, that's how God has revealed himself. So the universe had a beginning, not because we're imposing that upon it, but because we're deducing that from scientific evidence. For example, what Hubble pointed out with the redshift and everything. And logically and scripturally, we're deducing that about the nature of God.
Okay, all right. Okay, next question. What about other Abrahamic religions, such as Islam or Judaism? What is the evidence against those?
That's really not our topic this evening. We're talking about evidence for the existence of God, both of the Abrahamic, and they're called Abrahamic because they both respect and trace their roots to Abraham. But we're actually going to deal with that in a few weeks when we answer the question, what about other religions? Are you saying that only Christianity is right and all the other religions in the world are wrong? We will directly respond to this question of what about Islam? What about Judaism? What about all the Eastern religions? Darin, are you saying that all the billions of people in the world are wrong? How dare you? How intolerant? We'll address that in a few weeks.
Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, here's the next one. If there is evidence for the Big Bang, couldn't God have used that to create the universe? What's with the 7 days, or it could have been 7 milliseconds, or even 7 millennia?
Yeah, absolutely. I personally am a proponent of the Big Bang theory, and I'm not talking about the show. I personally follow where the evidence leads, and I believe that 13.7, 13.8 billion years ago, that the universe began. I personally believe that God used the Big Bang. Now, godly, intelligent people disagree. Some people think that the universe is much younger than that. As a Christ follower, we can follow where the evidence leads. We can believe in a young universe. We can believe in an old universe. What we're committed to as Christ followers is this. The Bible says in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So we're created to when? In the beginning. We're created to what? God created the heavens and the earth. We are not committed to how. We're created to when? In the beginning. We're created to what? God created the heavens and the earth. We're not created to how. We can follow where the evidence leads. So I agree. The universe, Genesis could be speaking poetically, metaphorically, when it talks about 7 days and so on and so forth. It could just be, I've actually taught on this quite extensively at Broadway, and you can check out some of that teaching on our website.
Great, thanks, Darin. Okay, so you contrast the universe that has a beginning and God, which is eternal. So what's the evidence that God is eternal?
Yeah, I think we just touched on that with the first or second question there when we talked about philosophically, you can't have an infinite regress of finite things. You can't have an infinite regress past into eternity past. It's irrational. And plus, you need a cause for a contingent universe. Plus, it's how God has revealed himself as his very nature. So all those three things together, you could make arguments for the eternality of God.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. So why does the argument from design provide evidence for the existence of God? Isn't science able to explain all the phenomena that we see around us without invoking God?
Yeah, this is not what's referred to as a God of the gaps argument, meaning God of the gaps argument is where you use God to fill in some gaps in scientific thinking and reasoning here. That's not what this is at all. It's a great question, but I think the questioner has misunderstood the argument from fine-tuning. Here's the argument from fine-tuning in simple premises. Number one, first premise, the fine-tuning of the initial conditions of the universe is due to either chance, law, or design. I'm going to say that again. That's the first premise. The fine-tuning of the initial conditions of the universe are due to either chance, law, or design. They are not due to either chance or law, meaning it is not necessary that all of those initial conditions be the way that they be the way that they are. It's not necessary that the cosmological constant and the gravitational constant and the weak force, for example, it is not necessary that they be the way they are. They could be different. So it's not law that they be the way they are. So it's either chance or design. And what we sought to point out, and what physicists are pointing out, is that the odds of it being chance are absolutely astronomical. They're beyond what you could actually imagine. That's why I tried to point out those numbers. The numbers are unimaginable. And so the argument for design is actually quite a powerful argument. It's what Anthony Flew, as I quoted, what finally convinced him. He said the argument from design has really become inescapable. So it's either chance or design. So as an atheist, you would have to say, it just so happens that we live in the one universe, and the odds are astronomical, admittedly, but lucky us. And so you either believe in design or absolute chance.
Thanks. Okay, here we go. Next question. Are you okay if I just keep rolling them at you like this?
Yeah, keep going, yeah.
This is how you normally spend your Wednesday nights, right?
Yeah, I wish I could.
Okay, here we go. Hey, Simon, if God exists, why doesn't he just show himself to everyone? Why have some evidence here, some evidence there? Why can't we see him?
Okay, well, a couple things. It's a question of what's often referred to as the hiddenness of God. And I understand the question, but if you think about this, I have a hard time believing that God creating a universe that is visibly contingent, that shows at the very quantum level to the obvious level signs of design, that he's actually stepped into history, interacted with humanity, and was resurrected from the dead with historical evidence, which we'll touch on next week. I don't think that's hiding. I think God has made himself very clear. In fact, scripture says that you just need to look at the stars and you can realize that there is a creator, there's a mind behind all of this. It's that simple. But really, it's not so much to believe in God. That's not a huge leap. God isn't so much concerned about people believing in him. That's an easy thing to do. Children can do that. The issue with that God is seeking to create or to encourage is have a relationship with him. The Bible says that even demons believe in God and they tremble. So it's not so much that you have to believe in God and that's just the be all and end all. Lots of people believe in God but don't have a relationship with him. He's seeking to have a relationship with humanity. So I would say that it takes more effort to reject the existence of God than it does to accept the existence of God. And we've given another layer that I didn't mention was the God imprinting upon us objective moral values that's shared by all of humanity. So these are all very powerful evidences. But let me make one more point as well. There is what's kind of referred to as an epistemic distance that God has allowed, where he's not imposed himself upon humanity. He has allowed for an epistemic distance where he's close enough to us and given us enough evidence that we really have no excuse for rejecting him, yet he remains far enough away that he's not forcing himself upon us. And so he leaves that distance open for us to engage him without forcing himself upon us.
Did I hear you say that it's easier to believe in God than reject God?
Yeah, I'd say it takes more effort to reject the existence of God than it does to accept the existence of God. And if you think about it, you've got to believe in a universe that brought itself out of nothing, by nothing. So you believe in not only the rabbit coming out of the hat, you believe in no rabbit, no hat, and no magician. I mean, that takes a lot of faith. It takes more faith to believe that than it does to believe that an eternal being created everything that we see.
So really, you're taking the easy way out by just believing in God, huh?
Exactly right. I'm lazy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Here's the next question. Darin's talk tonight. It brings up a lot of different evidences for some kind of God creating our world, but how does this point specifically to a Christian God?
Yeah. So we're going to understand that this is a 6-week course, and it is a cumulative case. So the only case that I'm seeking to make tonight is the case for theism. The God that we've described this evening could be any of the Abrahamic beings, for example. So it's a great question. We've just laid down the foundation tonight that there is strong evidence for a creator God, an intelligent God, an eternal God, an all-powerful God, for example. So that could be, several gods, if you will. So we're going to shave off some of the other options in the week to come. Next week, we will make a strong case that this God who created the universe is the God who raised Jesus from the dead. So that's a great question. I've only laid down the first layer of a cumulative case.
Okay, if let's just talk a little bit about objective morals for a moment. So, aren't objective morals just based on society? Like, what if someone was raised in a society that killing people was totally acceptable? Wouldn't then their morals be like, yeah, killing people is totally fine?
Yes, this questioner is making my point. So if imagine that there's a society that believes that slicing the heads off of female babies is good. That's a sign of a intelligent, healthy individual. If you have a female baby, slice its head off. That's what they believe. They've chosen to believe that. Are you saying, is this questioner saying that, well, that's their choice, and it's good there. So as soon as you cross the border into that land, then yes, that's moral, that's right, that's good, and we affirm that. That's their right, that's their choice. Or would you say, that's what they are saying is okay, but we're saying no, in any culture, no matter what the laws are, that is objectively wrong. Objective meaning it is wrong at all times for all people, no matter what their laws allow. We're saying that there are things that are simply wrong. Whether people agree with it or not, they are wrong. So in other words, if the Nazis had won World War II, it still would have been wrong to exterminate all Jewish people. Even though they, let's say, won and took over the world, and they made it the law that if you're a Jewish individual, you should be killed, even though it would be okay legally, it would still be wrong. It is objectively, morally wrong. And the only way that objective moral values exist is if there's an ultimate lawgiver, if there's an ultimate source of right and wrong. Otherwise, as this questioner is alluding to, it's simply purely subjective. In Great Britain, you ride on the left side of the road. In North America, you ride on the right side of the road. You say potato, we say potato, it's different, so be it. We're no more right than you are. Is morality just like that? Is morality just subjective? It's what you think is right or wrong? Intuitively, we all know that's not true. Intuitively, we know that there are things that are right or wrong in themselves, objectively. I'm sure that this questioner, if we went to their home this evening and killed their pet and stole everything from their home, that they would say, hey, that's not right, that's not fair, what you're doing is wrong. And if we said, well, we're Christ followers and we came and did all this to you, you'd say, well, you're hypocrites because you say one thing and you do another. And that's wrong. See, we're all appealing to this objective moral standard that intuitively we all agree is there. So I'm sure this questioner, if I said, and oh, and by the way, I reserve the right to make up facts tonight, and I reserve the right to absolutely lie to you and say that things that are completely untrue but claim that they're true, you would say, what a hypocrite, what a liar. I'm not going to listen to that guy. That's wrong. Well, what if it's right for me? You would say, no, it's wrong. You should not do that. It's objectively, morally wrong. We're all intuitively acknowledging this fact that objective moral values exist. And so the argument is simple, that if God does not exist, objective moral values don't exist. Objective moral values do exist. Intuitively, we know this. Therefore, God exists. That's the argument.
Great. Thanks, Darin. Okay, this one says, maybe this is more your opinion, but why do you think there are more skeptics about who God is in today's time, like in 2021, compared to maybe in previous years or in maybe back in ancient times?
Right. Actually, statistically, that's not true. It's true in Western civilization, Western culture, but in other parts of the world, it's quite the opposite. But in our culture, in the last 50 years or so, skepticism has, I think, arisen. And I think partly it's because what we're doing has not been done. That's one of the reasons why we created this course. It's because there's not been a rational, Christ followers have not gotten out on the playing field. They've not presented the arguments. And our culture has drifted away from the Judeo-Christian roots, and what we're teaching is not being taught. The evidence isn't being put out there. It's not being debated. It's not being discussed. So I think that's had a strong influence. Our universities, for example, have drifted over the last 50 years, and very much is dismantling the faith of many Christ followers who go into university. Many Christ followers are not equipped, they're not prepared to defend their faith. And so when they get to university, their first year sociology or anthropology professor, says, if you come into this class as a Christian, you're not going to leave as a Christian. And they throw arguments at them that the Christian has not heard before. And they walk away saying, wow, I guess the Bible isn't true. I guess Christianity is false. And it's not that what that professor said is right. It's just that Christ follower has not been equipped to defend or to respond to that professor. And so that's what this course is all about. It's about engaging with these arguments, engaging with the facts, and pushing back against which I think are improper or weak arguments against God's existence.
Great, thanks, Darin. Okay, here we go. This one is about animals. All right. Can we observe objective morals in animals? Like, does animal behavior show their innate moral values? Does God care about animals? And if so, is God vegan? All right. So there you go.
Yeah, that was great. Those are fair questions. No, animals, I think it was Aristotle who described human beings as rational animals. So biologically, we share the animal nature. We're mammals, but we are rational beings. And Scripture talks about us being made in the image of God. We have attributes in our existence that set us apart as rational animals. And so animals, are not moral. A lion does not murder an antelope. A lion doesn't rape a lioness. So there's not a moral realm. Animals do not make rational decisions or moral decisions. Animals act upon instinct, not upon a rational decision. That's why we don't charge animals with crimes. They're simply acting on instinct. They are a lower form of life than us. That's why you don't have a funeral when you run over a squirrel. They're not the same level of being as a human being is. We intuitively acknowledge this. Is God vegan? I don't think so, because God is the one who instituted the sacrificial system. And so we're actually, maybe we can touch on this more when we, in a few weeks, talk about why is there suffering and evil. And lots of times people bring up the question then about animal suffering and so on. So we'll save that for in a few weeks, but those are great questions.
Great, thanks. But it's cool if you're a vegan. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Go with it. Yeah.
By all means. Okay. Okay. This next question is maybe this is a more advice from you. Who's your favorite apologetics? Apologetics guy, I was going to say. Maybe the questioner said, besides Ravi Zacharias, who?
Yeah, actually, crazy enough, I was never really. I was never really a Ravi fan. He's a great, very intelligent man, but he rambled too much for me. I like more get to the point kind of a thing. Clearly, if anyone, apologetics, by the way, is not apologizing for your faith. It's from the Greek word apologia. It's giving an answer for, it's responding to, defending. And so we're Christian apologists, people responding to attacks on Christianity or defending their faith. It's from the ancient Greek. If anyone knows apologetics, and they would know that I'm a huge fan, they can tell by some of my arguments of William Lane Craig, Dr. William Lane Craig. He is a huge mentor of mine. We've hosted him at Broadway Church, and got to spend some time with him, and incredible mind. And he is clearly my mentor in this area. And there's some other great minds as well, but Dr. Craig would probably be my preeminent mentor in this area.
Great, thanks, man. Okay, here's another one about morals. Yeah. Darin, are you saying that only people who believe in God are moral? Are you saying that all atheists are immoral?
No, I'm glad that question was asked, because that's often misunderstood. I am not saying that you have to be a theist or religious to be moral. Not at all. What we're saying is that morality itself does not exist apart from the existence of God. If there is no God, there is no lawgiver. There's no ultimate standard of right and wrong. And so if there is no God, then all morality is simply made up. It's purely subjective. It's not objective. It's not outside of us. It's purely subjective. It's what we make up in our own minds. And it's every human for himself. I think I talked about in this presentation that if there is no God, then we came from nothing, we end up with nothing, we are ultimately nothing, we're just cosmic slime, and it's every slime ball for himself, and you can do what you want. And any morality that we have is what we've made up, and why should I listen to you? You just made up that law, you're no better than me, and I'm not right, I'm not wrong, I just am what I am. And so what I'm simply saying is, if there is no God, there's no ultimate objective morality. I am not saying that in order to live a moral life, live something truthful or good, that you have to be religious. Not at all. I know many atheists who are fine, upstanding, moral people. I know theists who are immoral people. So that's not what we're talking about.
Great, thanks, Darin. I got one more question to ask you here. I have lots of questions that were texted in. Don't have time to get to them all. I just wanted to say a huge thank you if you're engaging with us online, you're watching, if you're texting me questions. We really do appreciate it. And this really helps just make a fuller discussion as we're journeying together through this course. Okay, so this last question, it says, like, this person seems to be convinced by you. Okay, you've convinced someone. How do we now that we're convinced of this, how do we evangelize to someone who doesn't believe or maybe is an atheist? I'd like some practical tips, please. So what's your best advice?
Yeah, it's a good question. Understand this, you cannot argue someone into being a follower of Jesus. My faith, my experience with God is not based upon a series of tightly knit rational arguments. Our relationship with God is a spiritual, a supernatural thing. It's something that happens in our heart. The Spirit of God and our spirit connect together. So that's the foundation of my faith. It's something that you intuitively know, by reaching out to this God. But these arguments then show what you already intuitively know. And so now some people might say, well, other people have religious experiences. How do you know your religious experience is right? That's a very fair question. What you do is you have a religious experience, and then you look for defeaters for your religious experience. You're completely rational to believe that your experience that you've had is properly basic, that it was true. And then you can look for defeaters that could challenge the veracity of your experience. And that's what this series is all about. That's what I've been doing for the last 40 years. I've had this experience with God. I have this ongoing experience with God. And every now and then I get a doubt or I get a thought, am I believing a lie here? Is this rational? Is this true? And I then follow where the evidence leads. And each time over those 40 years, as I've dug into it, it has, again, affirmed and shown what I have known over the decades. So that's what part of this course is about. It's a way of looking at what you believe and saying, what I believe, what I hold to be true in my heart, does it stand the test of rationality? Are there defeaters for what I claim to believe? And if there are defeaters, then maybe I need to reevaluate my worldview. So to this individual, I would say, don't try to argue someone into being a Christ follower. What these arguments do is simply, what I see them as is sort of addressing maybe defenses or excuses. And maybe that's a wrong word, but it's the first word that comes to my mind right now. Maybe excuses people have for not considering God. Maybe some false beliefs people have about God. And so I do my best to knock down those barriers to opening up a relationship with God and saying, why don't you consider Christ? Well, because he didn't exist, because God doesn't exist, because this, that. Well, actually, did you know there's an answer for that? Did you know that what you're saying is not necessarily true? Here's some evidence, here's some facts. And then to get that person to say, oh, okay, well, then maybe I should consider relationship with God. Maybe I should consider the claims of Jesus. And then that person opens up their experience to the possibility. And if you open up your heart to the possibility that maybe God is out there, you will be amazed at what will happen, because God, you are right where God wants you to be. So I try to deflect some false ideas about God, making the path clear for a person to interact with God.
It's good. Thank you, Pastor Darin. This has been great. I'm excited for next week already. I got a whole week to wait. But I want to just encourage everyone out in virtual land that's watching to invite a friend, get them to zoom in to. Can you tell I've been living in a pandemic for long enough? But tell people to tune in with us and to join in on week 2. So next week, we're going to be addressing the question, what is the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus? And it is actually my favorite of the whole course. So you're not going to want to miss next week. I really feel like next week sets up the following week so well. And as we dive into deeper and more material. So Darin, thank you again for tonight. Thank you for being available to do this. Thank you for the teaching. And for everyone else, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you guys next week as we continue in week 2 of the Skeptic course. Have a great night.